I think it's your turn to start.
Okay. So for my first turn, I'm going to play 3 funding, and I have my zinc training and steel training, shocker. We're going to burn the steel, flare the zinc, move up 1 on the progression. I get 5 total boxings, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy Deceive because it's one of the best cards.
One of them?
Yes, that is going to be my turn.
I got a couple more actions than you. So I'm going to start out with my ally, Seeker, and then, well, I've got Pierce, so I'm going to burn Copper Cloud under Pierce, so that flares Bronze. It allows me to use Unveil, but before I do that, I also have House War and Hyper Aware. I'm going to flare Tin and Zinc on those. I know, a lot of resources early turn, but basically I get to go up 6 on the track, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I draw 2 extra cards as well as 3 total from my cards, so I'm going to draw 5 cards. Oh, these are good ones. I like these. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to take Ruin and we're going to burn Balance under it, Preserve, and I have 5 ATM tokens, so I'm going to burn that on Preserve. That moves me up another 6. So far it's going to be 11 damage, and then Confrontation, actually, I have these 4 tokens, so I think I win.
I forgot you were supposed to take 2 damage at the end of my turn.
Sule! The Cosmere is filled with magical weapons that have a habit of talking back. There is one talking weapon, however, that seems to surpass the rest in sheer power and abilities. A sword with a mysterious creation that makes the righteous sick and the unrighteous unable to be sick anymore. That's right. Today we're going to be talking about Nightblood, and specifically why I think he's becoming just a little bit too overpowered. There will be major spoilers for Wind and Truth and Warbreaker, so turn back now if you're not caught up. If you are caught up and you're new here, please subscribe and like this video if you enjoy. Now, let's begin with the origins of this power-hungry sword. Nightblood was created by 2 of the 5 scholars on Nulthus. Primarily, it was Shashara, Vasher's lover, who actually did the process of creating the sword. With 1,000 breaths, a complex visualization, and the command to destroy evil, a common steel sword was turned into arguably the most dangerous object in the entire Cosmere. So dangerous, in fact, that Vasher decided that he needed to eliminate Shashara with her own creation before she could leak the information to the public. Nightblood luckily doesn't remember this event, otherwise you'd have to add intense trauma to his list of abilities. Shashara and Vasher weren't quite prepared for what they made, as it doesn't seem that they anticipated Nightblood having sentience. Vasher reminisces on the creation of Nightblood in Warbreaker chapter 51. It should have created an awakened object with no more of a mind than the tassels on his cloak. Nightblood should not be alive, and yet he was. It's a good thing that Vasher kept this secret though, because nobody outside of him and one of the other scholars currently knows how to give objects sentience like this. And that is if this other scholar is still alive. But with Vasher's track record, probably not. After his creation, Nightblood would appear as a deep black sword that leaks black smoke. When used to cut non-living objects, it eviscerates it. Listen to this description of Vasher using the blade from Warbreaker chapter 56. He simply jumped onto a table and rammed Nightblood into the ceiling. A circle 10 feet wide vanished. Dark, mist-like smoke fell around him like streaks of paint. Additionally, if the blade of Nightblood so much as touches a living creature, the entire entity vaporizes to black smoke. See, Nightblood doesn't just sever people's spiritual essence like a normal Rosharan's friend blade or honor blade does. He annihilates people's spiritual, physical, and cognitive forms, absorbing the investiture that they contain and adding it to his massive pool of power. I mean, just listen to this nasty description of Szeth stabbing a man with Nightblood from Oathbringer chapter 92. Flesh and blood puffed instantly into black smoke. Ordinary shard blades burned only the eyes, but this sword somehow consumed the entire body. It seemed to sear away even at the man's soul. Gross. There are other great feats of power that Nightblood has done, like chipping an honor blade, destroying a shardic vessel, and even fully collapsing a perpendicularity. The raw power is unreal. Now, wielding Nightblood might seem desirable based off of its sheer power, but I haven't even explained the consequences yet. First of all, you better not be considered evil by Nightblood, as he was given the single single command, destroy evil. You might ask, what would a sword consider evil? That seems a little bit arbitrary. You, intelligent viewer, would be absolutely correct. Nightblood considers people who would want to use him for selfish reasons to be evil. People like that will feel a compulsion to use the sword to eliminate everyone around them before eliminating themselves. Yeesh. Luckily, if you have a heart devoid of greed, the sword will simply make you feel sick. There are, however, those who lie within the middle of these intentions. The small few who fully align with the intent of Nightblood. Masha daughter Shaliv puts it best in her book, Knights of Wind and Truth. It is true that many feel nausea when picking it up, which is a sign of a heart uncorrupted by greed. Others are, then, corrupted by that greed. Most interesting are those in between. Those who feel neither emotion. Those who can use the sword, but walk a fine line upon its edge. There are only a couple of people that we have seen with this ability to bond with and use Nightblood. Vasher and Szeth are the most notable ones. Even with the ability to use Nightblood without immediately being overtaken with the compulsion to destroy everyone around them, they are still not immune to the dangers of the sword. See, when Nightblood is drawn from his sheath, and yes, he is stored in an aluminum sheath to help reduce the effects of his abilities, he begins to rapidly absorb the investiture from its wielder. The arm and body of the wielder are painfully overtaken by black tendrils originating from the hilt of Nightblood. If they run out of investiture to feed Nightblood, he will instead consume their spark of life. So, Nightblood is worse than useless in the hands of people with very small amounts of investiture. He can be very useful, yet still very dangerous to people who have a constant access to investiture like Szeth with his Stormlight. With that in mind, you might be wondering why I think Nightblood is overpowered. Only a select few can use the sword at all, and it drains them investiture while wielded. The negatives clearly outweigh the positives, right? Wrong. In Wind and Truth, the therapist Kaladin Stormblessed decides helping people wasn't his only calling. Highly destructive sentient swords also need love and attention. Kaladin had connected himself to Nightblood, feeding the sword his investiture while Szeth used it to fight. Unfortunately, Kaladin ran out of Stormlight. His own hand started to decay, but Szeth, for some reason, still got the worst out of it. Szeth tried to make his way to the aluminum sheath to stop Nightblood from consuming him, but it was just too much. He had to pry Nightblood off of himself before throwing it away, but not before Nightblood took his entire arm with him. Nightblood continued to consume Kaladin, but he reminded Nightblood of some of their therapy lessons. From Wind and Truth, chapter 143, Rule 1, Kaladin whispered, searching for the voice, landing on the spinning sword. I can choose. Evidently, someone other than Szeth had been listening to the lessons Kaladin had been teaching. You are not a thing, Nightblood, Kaladin said. I am not a thing! The pain vanished. Nightblood spun to a stop, lazily, the smoke fading away. The black sword balanced on its point for a second, then clattered to the stones. So, did you catch that? Apparently, Nightblood learned that he can choose to stop consuming its wielders. This almost completely gets rid of the negatives of wielding Nightblood. Obviously, it appears that he will continue to consume the investiture of his wielder, but he can now decide to just stop doing this, saving them from completely passing away. This is the main danger of using Nightblood. Now, the sword can just not be dangerous anymore. This provides all of the benefits of wielding Nightblood without the worry of being completely consumed. That feels a little overpowered. But hold on, we're not done yet. It is now official that Nightblood can provide his wielder surge binding. What makes this even more scary is that this process didn't even seem to be an issue for him. Check out this Nightblood quote from Wind and Truth chapter 140. I can restore your lashings. Those are easy. Even a Spren can give those. Now we fight? We finally fight? He then goes on to give Szeth at least the surges common to Skybreakers, gravitation and division. This was because Nightblood had a convenient off-screen conversation with the Honor Blades, learning their secrets. Now, I don't think I have to explicitly explain how insane of a power creep this is for Nightblood. Remember, the surges provided by the true Spren are restricted by Cultivation, Honor, and Odium's agreement. Nightblood has no such restrictions, and he can presumably grant unrestricted surge binding to its wielder. Would the wielder need extra investiture to power these surges? Well, yeah, that's quite possible, but you already need a healthy amount of power to use Nightblood regularly, and Szeth does seem to be able to use these surges on a limited stipend from Kaladin. So, Nightblood eviscerates everything it touches, it merely needs to cut enemies to vaporize them into black smoke. Now it can provide access to the powers that have destroyed a planet without restriction. Then the downside of using Nightblood is completely eliminated by his ability to just choose not to continue hurting its wielder. Now look, I get that you would need a ton of investiture to get the full abilities out of Nightblood, but I would argue that this is true for every Great Cosmere power. You need access to a lot of metals to be a fully effective Mistborn. You need to write tons of lines to cast the most powerful Aeon Door spells. Even in the Stormlight Archive, you need access to tons of investiture to fight an extended battle. That, or you literally have to bond to an ancient being of great power to do things like open a perpendicularity. Nightblood still requires a lot of investiture to use, yes, but if you can use the sword, you can now have unrestricted Surge Binding with a devastating weapon that will no longer fully consume you. I can't help but feel like Nightblood is a little bit too powerful. I also can't help but feel like the sword's access to Surge Binding kind of cheapened the specialness of Surge Binding. If this method of using investiture is so powerful and needs to be capped by gods, it bothered me a little bit that he was just like, oh yeah, doing this is super easy. Even the Spren can do it. Like, okay, I get that Nightblood is super powerful and is filled with tens of thousands of breath worth of investiture, but being able to easily learn how to grant Surge Binding? I don't know, man. The power creeping is pretty crazy. What do you think? Is Nightblood too overpowered? Does his consumption of investiture still make him too dangerous to be worth it? With technological improvements across the Cosmere and access to Purified Door, could Nightblood be the most sought after object in the whole Cosmere? Thanks for watching, and please subscribe if you've watched the video all the way up to this point. Kolo.